Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 27 of The Owner's Box After Dark. I'm your host, Mark Farinella, the former assistant sports editor, sports columnist, Patriots beat writer, floor cleaner, paper seller, contest runner, you name it, of the Sun Chronicle of Attleboro, Massachusetts, now in my second year of blissful retirement. I'm recording here on November 16th. It's a Monday, 2020, here in the palatial confines of Studio A here at Fulton Pond Studios in Mansfield, Massachusetts, as always. And I have a special treat for you folks today. It didn't work exactly as I wanted it to. I have to learn a little bit more about the use of Skype and how to split my screen. But I will have a guest today for the first half of this episode of After Dark. And yes, indeed, that is After Dark. I have Foxborough High School girls basketball coach Lisa Downs in for her fourth appearance on not only this podcast, but of course the OG, the Owner's Box, the audio podcast that is on every single popular podcasting platform. And believe me, I've checked. In fact, over the weekend, I actually fixed a few things. So now you can get the Owner's Box, the original, on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio.com, and the Radio.com mobile app. That's a pretty good lineup for a little dinky podcast from a guy here in Mansfield, Massachusetts. Yay! Go Hornets. Anyway, but we are talking Foxborough today, and happily so. Lisa, of course, is one of the most successful coaches in our area. She has won 2 state championships in the last 3 years with some very, very talented athletes. And, of course, she is a product of Foxborough High School, where, as Lisa Garland, she was an outstanding forward and went on to play at what became UMass Dartmouth. It was Southeastern Massachusetts University at the time, if I'm not mistaken. And she's always very knowledgeable. She's very passionate. She actually has more enthusiasm for what she does than a lot of people do, and people who are maybe 15 years younger than her too. And yes, I'm not telling any tales out of school. She readily admits she's in her 50s now, but she is very energetic about the sport and very concerned about the sport of basketball right now, obviously, because as I speak to you today, there were meetings between the individual sport committees of the Massachusetts Interscholastic Athletic Association, the basketball, hockey, and I believe a couple of others, with the state, with the MIAA's medical, sports medicine committee. That's right. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to present COVID-19 protocols to the sports medicine committee for them to keep sending them up this ladder of all of these levels of approval before they can actually determine whether there's going to be a basketball and a hockey season this year. And we're running out of time, basically. The original idea was to start the practices for basketball and hockey and the other approved winter sports by November 21st, and that's pretty sure that that's not going to happen yet. I know a number of leagues already pushed back to November 28th. Most people were expecting that they would all happen around the 30th, but now there's concerns that it will not happen until maybe even the new year, if it at all, given the rising numbers of COVID-19. So I talked to Lisa Downs today about the concerns that a coach has and that, also her athletes would have about whether a season will take place and what they're willing to do and to sacrifice to make it happen. As you folks know, I did a lot of broadcasting for North TV during the fall, and I was doing soccer and field hockey games, and both of those sports were radically altered by COVID-19 protocols that were set down in this same process back in August and September. So, but at that time, too, COVID wasn't spiking the way it is all of a sudden, And so it's a scary time for any high school athlete or high school coach. And this process is ongoing, and really will not know much about it until it actually happens, because the meetings that are going on are not open to the public. So I guess transparency is an idea that's gone out the window during probably one of the most important times of this season and the preparation for a new one. So anyway, for the first half of the episode, we will talk with Lisa Downs. And just understand that it is a longer interview, but you only get half of it here because that's the way we do it here in the Owner's Box After Dark. Oh, God, I could hit the button. The Owner's Box After Dark. I don't have to do that with the audio podcast. And yes, the rest of the entire interview will appear on the audio podcast. And so after you watch this, if you want to hear another 35 minutes of good local talk about basketball and about holiday charity too. And remember, Lisa Downs is she's the boss of the Foxborough Discretionary Fund, which is a very worthwhile charitable pursuit in the town of Foxborough. And especially now, after these horrible 38 weeks or so of this pandemic, I would have to believe that their good work is needed more than ever, even in an affluent town like Foxborough. And as Lisa Downs told us before many times, you think Foxborough is an affluent town, but every town has people in need, and those needs have been magnified during this very, very trying time in which we all live. So we'll talk about that. And then after our break, we will go into some other topics of the day here, including the Patriots' very rousing victory over the Baltimore Ravens in a monsoon at Gillette Stadium. And I'm sorry, I have to apologize. I actually said that the game was going to be in Baltimore. I don't know what I was talking about. I do know that their next game is in Houston, so I'm not going to be mistaken about that one. But yes, the Patriots came up big, playing with great resolve in that contest on Sunday night, and giving NBC no regrets for for their decision to telecast that game. So anyway, that will be coming in the second half of this episode. So as you can see, I had my notes all ready for Lisa, and we did it on Skype. I wanted to split the screen, but I was not successful at getting that to happen. But somehow I get the feeling you guys would rather look at her than look at me anyway. So sorry, Lisa. I think it's a great interview. As usual, she's frank and open about her concerns, and you have to respect her and all of the coaches in our area that are just sitting on pins and needles right now, waiting for decisions to be made about their livelihoods and the means of keeping their kids happy and keeping all of the athletes in the area from going stir crazy. So we'll get into that right now. Lisa, we're about a week before the winter season is about to start, and the process for determining whether we will have a season or not is still in its earliest stages. How frustrating is that for you as a coach?
It's very frustrating. I'm one that likes to have control of everything, and so I typically start planning not just my tryouts, but my season, at least a month prior to the first day that we step on the court. So it's been a little, unsettling that I can't do that planning right now. And, the uncertainty is not just difficult for me, but it's difficult for the players to kind of wrap their heads around. So it's all in all, it's just not a great place to be.
No, I can imagine. Right now, as we November 16th, and today was the day when the MIAA individual sports committees were supposed to be sending their recommendations for the COVID-19 safety protocols to the MIAA Sports Medicine Committee. Now, those meetings were starting just as we are starting this, and they're not open to the public. So we're all just going to have to wait until they, have some white smoke raise out of the chimneys or whatever, and we'll find out something of what happened. But as the case is, the Sports Medicine Committee will review those recommendations they like them, they'll forward them on to the COVID-19 task force. If not, it goes right back to the coaches to try to come up with something new. Going down the road, it would go from the COVID-19 task force to the board of directors of the MIA, and the whole process is supposed to be done by the end of the week because we were supposed to start the winter season on November 21st. Before we speculate about that, have you heard anything about what the basketball committee might be recommending for changes? We've already seen drastic changes to soccer and field hockey, and I know a lot of people are fearful over what alterations might be coming forth for basketball.
Yeah, I really haven't heard anything from anyone really reliable at this point. There's a lot of speculation out there. A lot of people putting out some rumors that, I'm just fingers crossed that they're just, people just making up things as they go along. But in a perfect world, I guess with where we are in today's world, it would be everyone required to wear masks and then very limited spectators. So, I went to a couple of soccer games and, they did have to change some rules that did have implications in the game. But I think more so in basketball, if they were to change any rule, it would really just completely alter what basketball is. So I'm really hesitant to even speculate as to what they're going to be for the modifications.
I broadcasted games for North TV for King Philip Soccer and field hockey. And yeah, the changes were quite a bit. Field hockey, of course, they went down from 11 on 11 to 7 on 7, taking 8 kids off the field, basically. Soccer, I printed out 3 full pages of rules changes, but I finally found a way to boil it all down when I was trying to explain it to people by just calling them the COVID whistles. That's all you could call it, because basically they were to prevent contact out on the field, and that eliminated headers and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, at that point, soccer became more like field hockey because of all the whistles involved. But it's the in the start of all this process, though, the Massachusetts Executive Office for Energy and Environmental Management did recommend that all participants in sports would wear masks, that benches would be socially distanced, and that for the indoor sports, crowds would be limited to 50% of gymnasium capacity. But I'm actually wondering how much of that could change, especially as we see coronavirus infection numbers skyrocketing out of control right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I definitely, I'm fearful of, but at the same time, I'm hopeful because we are getting so close to that November 30th, the day that we were supposed to all step on the court. So that's, 2 weeks from today. So I'm hoping that because there's so much work that needs to go into planning, I'm hoping that they are not going to be holding off all that much longer with making any drastic changes as to what needs to be done in order for us to have a season. And, as someone that works at a school, I'm just very familiar with the impact that it's having on kids, socially, mentally. To not have a sport it makes me very, very, uncomfortable with what to go through in that area as well.
As I mentioned, of course, in my job with North TV, I got to see a lot of games in the fall. I will say one thing. I think the kids and the coaches and the officials all did the best they could to adapt to the changes. But as you mentioned, I mean, there's a point to where changes might ruin the integrity of the sport, especially basketball. I mean, and we're not afraid to make changes here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I do think that the EEA, not having much to do with sports to begin with, looked at it as if they were looking at restaurants and other businesses that had to be restrained during this time. A New York Times report during the soccer season established that Massachusetts had changed the sport of soccer more than any other state, so it could be played during the fall. Does that scare you when you think of basketball? I mean, it does. They really can change.
Yeah, and I mean, everything that I love about the sport requires contact. So, man-to-man defense and pressing and boxing out, everything requires you to be, have that skin-to-skin contact. So, I mean, as I've seen people say, we just want to play. We want the kids to be able to play, but in the same time, we want them to be able to play the game that they've known since they were 5. Yeah. So, I'm hopeful, but fearful at the same time.
Well, I could see greater restrictions on hand checking, perhaps. I mean, obviously, they've tried to take hand checking out of the sport anyway. And after, usually they'll say it's a point of emphasis at the beginning of the season that the referees are going to call it. And then usually 3 weeks into the season, they stop calling it because they just can't stand having that many whistles.
Right.
And everybody's upset about it. But I could see it as a point of trying to limit contact. That's part of it. But as you said, rebounding especially, what do? Do you take kids off the line? Say if you're in a foul shooting situation, do you take some of those kids off the line, only have maybe 2 people in the position to rebound or all that? I'm just thinking, I'm sort of spitballing here because I really haven't heard anything either about what restrictions would be recommended. But if you're looking to restrict contact, the only thing I can think of is trying to make it so that fewer people are involved in a specific type of play, like rebounding and boxing out. I mean, that's, and then again, that changes the sport a lot too. I mean, you could see the ball bouncing off the rim and bouncing all the way down into the other side of the court because nobody can touch it.
And then I have a lot of my girls that played, as many other Hockomock kids, played AAU all summer and not into the fall. And they were playing games every single weekend just over the border in New Hampshire. And the only restrictions there were that you had to wear a face mask and that only one family member could accompany each player. So that was really their only restrictions that they were facing for the last several months. And as far as I know, they were very successful in doing that. So, maybe they'll, look at some of those different state, things that have worked in the last few months and just maybe learn from that. But that's what I'm hoping for.
When you're on these shows with me, you tend to read my mind a little bit from time to time because that was one of my questions about the fact that I knew that a lot of kids had played at AAU ball up in New Hampshire. And as far as I've heard I have not heard as if there were any widespread COVID outbreaks that made the news, as opposed to youth hockey, where there were problems inside the enclosed rinks. I mean, I know that a lot of these places where they play AAU tournaments and all that are usually huge, kind of wide open type of buildings. The hockey rinks had much more problems. And I think a lot of people know that hockey rinks aren't always the cleanest places in the world, especially their locker rooms. And I know when the state told the hockey rinks to close until November 7th, I think a part of the idea was for the people who run those rinks to come up with some ideas to increase the opportunity to improve hygiene and all that. But I also think that certainly there will be restrictions on them, and that's one. I'm actually going to be covering some hockey this year, if you can believe it. I think that the one thing is that the kids are going to have to come to the games basically dressed. They're not going to. The only thing they'll be able to do is put their skates on. I would assume that might be the same case in basketball. Although knowing girls basketball as I do, I mean, how many girls actually shower in the gyms? None, right?
None. And so I think that might be, some just any more confined area like a locker room. I think those would maybe close down, which is fine. And we've pretty much just used those for our team talks, which we can do in any other space.
Now, it seems to me as we're getting close to what that original date was supposed to be, and I'm thinking that it's almost going to be impossible to hold to it. I know that there were at least two leagues that I knew of. I know the Bay State League and I think the Patriot League, and there might have been a couple up on the North Shore also that had already built in an extra week into their planning. So they were going to go to, I think, November 28th. But as I speak to you today, the state of Rhode Island officially established that December 11th would be the start of practice now instead of what was going to be November 30th, I think, down there. So they just made that decision today. Some would suggest that maybe it's a good idea to wait until well into December to start practicing and maybe even hold off until January for games just in case there are COVID-19 spikes following Thanksgiving family gatherings. Are you afraid at all of that?
Yes, because we're already, ending our season shorter. We're ending on February 21st. So the more we wait, the less likely we're going to have anything. And so I'm thinking that earlier we start, probably the better. And I know I've been talking to my kids about what they're doing for Thanksgiving, if there's going to be any travel involved, and really trying to, get the families thinking about that. But I'm fortunate in that I have a lot of players that play a fall sport, so that have been very familiar with what Foxborough has been dealing with right now with the girls soccer team and what can happen and what, any exposure can do to limit a team's entire season. So, personally, I think that the quicker we can get the season started, the better. I think if we start waiting, it's just going to continue to push back, and then before you know it, it's going to be February.
Well, one of the issues involved, too, is that schedules have not been finalized yet. I know I've looked on as many websites as I can look for to find schedules, and I know that whatever's out there were things that were drawn up before the COVID-19 situation hit, and everybody was assuming it would be over by now. So as a result, the athletic directors have got to set their schedules. I'm assuming, and I think I heard something to the effect that they might say lift a waiver or establish a waiver that perhaps there could be more 3-game weeks involved, so that you could try to get in a schedule. Because I would hate to see the Hockomock League schedule, especially, just limited to 10 games as the soccer and field hockey schedules were. I think you can get in a full 16-game league schedule if you play enough games in a week. But again, all of this is up in the air because it's all going to come down to whether or not the athletic directors, whether or not the state believes it's safe for these kids to play. And I know what you said. You said that, and other people have told me the same thing. They're worried about the emotional and mental health of the kids because they've been denied all these things. But at the same token, we all have to weigh the more immediate threat, which is the physical threat, because COVID is out of control again. And if not for the kids' sakes, I mean, they may weather it better than us old folks. Well, I won't add you in that category because you're still a lot younger than I am. But I'm saying that they could bring the virus home to people still, and there has been a lot of loosening of the preparedness over these months. We're all kind of COVID tired. We're tired. Yes. So it's like I think that at the end of all of these deliberations this week, that may be the determining factor, though, and that's what I'm afraid of, is that the state may err on the side of caution and just say, look, we can't play. Yeah,
I think that would be not in the best benefit, in the best interest of a lot of the people here. And I definitely see both sides of the coin as someone that's over 50 and as someone that really cares about the mental health of these teenage kids, that, sports is their only constant. And if you can give them back a little bit of control in their life, I think it just really goes a long way. So especially for these seniors, the seniors who had, their junior year cut short and now has really impeded on their senior year, I think if you can just add in sports of some type to each of the seasons, it would be a huge benefit.
Now, of course, your team of last year lost its chance to play in a state championship game in March because we were in the earliest stages of the coronavirus crisis, and the state saw that it was just spiraling out of control. So all of the championship games were canceled. You were fortunate that the MIAA determined to give both you and why do I always forget who you guys were playing? It was Taconic of Pittsfield. You guys shared the state title in Division II, which is, I think, a good decision. Personally, I think you guys would have won the game, but we'll never know that. But beyond that, during what's usually regarded as a very important part of team building is your summer activities. And this year, many of those activities were wiped out. The Mass Premier Court Summer Leagues were gone. You were going to participate in the Wally Seaver preseason tournament, which is usually a big thing. It's a pretty good competition for give you an idea of what you can expect for the upcoming season. And that was wiped out. So thinking about how many people you've had to replace on this year's team from last year's team, and we'll get into that in a little bit more depth in the second part of our interview. But I just want to say right now, do you think this is going to set you back a lot because you didn't have those summer activities, and that has would just completely kind of sidetrack the preparation for the season?
To be honest, it is a huge gap in our team this year. So the preseason activities such as the leagues, the different tournaments I do, whether it's the Seaver tournament, the one at Stonehill, and then the one leading into tryouts. Those are all important kind of building blocks for the team foundation to get set, established. And especially this year, because we have so many gaps in our roster, I think it is going to maybe set us back a little bit. I don't see that it's going to, a lot of these girls are familiar with each other from other sports, even the incoming freshmen and the younger kids, but it is a very important part of your season, those couple of months leading into November. So it's just going to be a different, and I'm not going to be the only team in that boat. So I think we're all going to be able to kind of commiserate on the same level, and we'll get through it. It's just going to be a very different looking season.
I think one aspect I do want to ask you about before we close out this interview is that the people who are least represented in the decision-making process are the kids. They are the athletes. They don't have a say because they're kids. The adults are making the decisions, and they're not allowed even feedback, I guess. But I'm sure you get feedback. I'm sure you hear from the kids. And how are they looking at this situation, and what kind of comments do you hear from them, and what do you feel is in their hearts right now?
I actually hear from them quite often, especially the upperclassmen, and they just keep asking every day, so did you hear anything? Did you hear anything? And I think just the uncertainty is just really, it's wearing away at them. With their school being on campus the way it is now, with just being around their friends, and maybe not even at all because it goes alphabetical order. So I think that they're searching for that one time that they can get back together to be in that, the team, the gym, and to really just focus on basketball. And so they're very, they're concerned. And I think even though that they were told that the season was going to happen, it was going to start on November 30th, they're not, they're not stupid. So they know that anything can happen right now, and that everything's evolving daily. So I think just the uncertainty is really eating away at them, as it is us. But I do feel more for the kids than I do for any of us coaches, that's for sure.
Are they kind of at a point, too, where I think I saw this in soccer and field hockey, where the kids were just willing to accept anything? I mean, they knew that they weren't going to have the opportunity to play in a state tournament this year. And this was going to be the last year of the traditional state tournaments before we get into the whole state tournament thing, the entire state competing in the divisions, which will take place next year if we're able to do that even. But certainly there would not be a state tournament in basketball this year either. I just think that perhaps the Hockomock League will do the same thing, or at least attempt to do the same thing with this Hockomock Cup tournament that they've had for these other sports. Although, really, when you look at it especially for boys basketball, it's going to be such a quick turnaround for the boys who are playing basketball and want to play football to go into that fall 2 season, which will take up March and April. I mean, there's just not going to be any rest for the weary in any of that. But do you think that they're willing to accept just about anything right now just to get on the court? Yeah,
I don't think if I asked any of my players if, A, do you want to return only if there's, no restrictions made, or B, would you just want to shut down the season? The girls would want to come back no matter what. So if they had to play zone defense all the time, which they know I would rather not on any day, they'd rather do that. If they had to play 2-on-2 full court, they would do that. So they don't care. And I can tell that with 100% certainty, they would all return regardless of what the modifications may be.
Well, Lisa, I do want to thank you for participating in this. I hope that we will have a season to talk about. And I would also like to return to my role as a occasional broadcaster for Foxborough Cable Access and to see some of your games. Now, for all those who are watching this on the Owner's Box After Dark, just remember that we will be talking more, and that will be available on the traditional The Owner's Box, the original Gangsta, as I like to call it, the audio podcast, which will also be available shortly on all of the popular podcasting platforms. But in the meantime, Lisa, I want to thank you for participating, and I wish you all the best of luck.
Thank you so much, Mark.
Okay. And I would like to thank Foxborough High School girls basketball coach Lisa Downs for echoing the sentiments of, I believe, most of her colleagues in the coaching profession around here, who were all waiting desperately to find out whether or not, in fact, there will be a winter sports season here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Okay, we'll be back with a few more things after this word from our friends, and yes, I found some more, our friends from the land of the rising sun. We'll be back.
お腹空いちゃったな。なんか手軽に食べれるもんな。
腹が減ったらカレー飯。飯も一緒に入ってるぜ。作り方簡単。水を入れたらレンジでチン。なるみちゃんもびっくり。
味びっくりなんだけど。
ほれほれ、どうだ、うまそうだろ。4つの味から選べるぜ。イカ八郎もびっくり。
たまげた。
簡単うまいカレー飯。兄さん、
今日の飯はカレー飯だぞ。
うわ、やったー。ジャスティスカレー飯。
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to Watching Me Eat. Welcome back to another half of this episode of the Owner's Box After Dark. And yes, I am eating a pizza. I made it myself. In fact, if you don't mind listening to me chew for a minute, and you watched me eat clam cakes yesterday, the last episode, I make my own Chicago-style deep dish pizza. Let me see if you can catch a glimpse of that. See all that wonderful tomato on the top of it and how thick it is? And it's like layered with mozzarella, and it's just yummy. And actually there's about 5 different types of cheeses in this, too. But I make it pretty much from scratch. I use a Pillsbury pre-made dough, but because they make it in a square pan shape, so what I have to do is I have to put that round part in the middle of a round pan, and then build up the crust, which is why sometimes pieces of the crust fall off like this, because it doesn't really mesh that well. It's the way they've got it oiled up and all that, but hey, it works. I mean, it really does give me the deep dish style of crust. So, and it's tasty too, because I actually paint it with a little bit of tomato sauce before I stick it. Well, what I do is I pre-bake the crust, and so I paint it with a little bit of tomato, so that burns into the crust, and it gives it just this really terrific tangy flavor. And of course, I use San Marzano tomatoes, the best. Nobody who has an ounce of Italian blood in them would use anything else. All right, so the only thing about that pizza last night is that I made it for my consumption during the football game. And as always, I waited too long. So the first quarter is going on in the other room, and I don't have a TV in the kitchen. So I'm listening to it, and I'm putting all the elements of the pizza together. And I'll tell you, at that point, I thought I would have one of the best pizzas going that I'd ever built. It had everything. All in the right proportions, layered beautifully. I was so proud of this one. I took some tomatoes and I squished some of the liquid out of them at first, so that too much liquid wouldn't boil up during the cooking. Because the last thing you want is a soggy crust at the bottom because of liquid from the pizza, from the tomatoes that kind of seeps down into it. So I crushed some of that stuff down so you get the good flat chunks of tomato in there, and then you add a few more robust unsquished ones for the final cooking process. So I thought everything was great, and the only thing it needed was oregano. So I reached up into my cabinet, pulled out a bottle that I thought was oregano. I started shaking it while I was listening to the Patriots game, and then I looked down and I said, "Oh my God, minced onions." I had lots of them. And I said, "Uh-oh, this is ruined." But since I didn't have any wasn't going to throw it out. So I just scooped out some of the minced onions, and I spread the remaining pile as much as I could, and then added the oregano and the olive oil. And I said, you know what? I'll take a chance on it. I like onion pizzas. My favorite order to Great Woods Pizza down in West Mansfield is an onion pizza because they do it so well. So I cooked it for the prerequisite 20 minutes, and you know what? It didn't suck. I prefer my deep dish pizzas without other elements in them. That's 5 years at Northwestern that taught me that. But I actually think that it wasn't bad. It wasn't the worst one I've ever made. It wasn't ruined. I ate the 3/4 of it during the game, and I saved a piece for tonight, which I will get back to, so I don't have to subject you to watching me eat while I try to podcast. Okay, the beverage of choice tonight is Diet Dr. Pepper, of course, the easiest to get to. I do love it. And the mood candle is a little different tonight. It's still red, but it is the apple cider Yankee candle. Oh, man, that spice, that kind of cinnamon smell to it is just really terrific. I had it in the bathroom. But I figured I got to mix things up out here a little bit too. So I brought this out here to brighten the evening a little, and it has. All right, one little tidbit of breaking news to follow up our Lisa Downs' appearance. We were talking about the process it's taking for the MIAA to approve a winter season. Well, it's already hit a snag, apparently. The individual sport committees were meeting today with the Sports Medicine Committee of the MIAA. If the Sports Medicine Committee liked the COVID-related protocols that the sport committees had submitted, then it would go on to the next step, which is to the COVID-19 task force, and then on and on and on. It's 700 layers to the bureaucracy around here. Well, according to reports on the internet, and while nothing has been officially released, apparently didn't work. They didn't. The Sports Medicine Committee didn't buy what the sport committees were selling, so it has to go back to them for further consideration. They will consider it tonight, and I'm sure in the early stages of tomorrow, they will resubmit to the Sports Medicine Committee tomorrow, and hopefully come up with some ideas that will help this basketball and hockey season go forward. But I am getting less and less optimistic about it as days pass and as I hear more of stuff like this. And if you listen to Lisa Downs, you know that the coaches and the players want to play. They want to coach. Coaches want to coach. The players want to play. But there is an overriding concern, and that's why I always tell everybody to use their hand sanitizer, wear their masks, because if those numbers don't go down, we may not have any sports until the spring, if even then. And that's as depressed as I want to get. Okay, on to the Patriots game. And what a game it was, sports fans. The New England Patriots resurrected their season a little bit, at least so they're saying, by upsetting the Baltimore Ravens at Gillette Stadium by the score of 23-17. It was played in not terrible weather in the first half and an absolute monsoon in the second half. But you know what? The Patriots never flinched. They were trailing earlier in the game, but they took the lead 13-10 on a 24-yard pass from Jacoby Myers, yes, a wide receiver, to Rex Burkhead with 1 minute and 2 seconds left in the second quarter. And that was a shocker by all indications. Certainly shocked everybody on the broadcast crew. And, I have to say that was kind of Edelman 2.0. And yes, repeatedly during the broadcast, we learned that Jacoby Myers was a high school quarterback who was changed from quarterbacking at some point in his upbringing. I was not sure whether it was in college or I think it was in college when he got shifted over a little bit. But still, that was a pretty impressive throw, and so that got everybody excited. The Ravens managed to cut the deficit to 6 points with 8 seconds left in the third quarter, but they were held off the scoreboard during the driving monsoon in the fourth quarter, and the Patriots improved to 4-5 after in the 10th week of the season. And while that may not be a great record to have when I think you have 9 other teams ahead of you in the AFC, it's still an improvement, and it's a chance, to keep the season going. And I think given all the changes in the personnel and all that, I think that's all anybody really should be excited about right now, is that they have a chance to go further. But of course, this is New England, and everybody overreacts. Meantime, before I get to the overreaction, stars of the game: Damian Harris, the running back, 22 carries for 121 yards. I think you've seen the last of Sony Michel as a starting running back as a result of what Harris has done over the last few weeks. So now, of course, that doesn't mean that Sony Michel might not stay on the Patriots roster. There's always room for more than one running back. And again, Burkhead's having a great season, but I just want to make sure he stays healthy before we give him the farm going forward. As long as Sony Michel just doesn't go to the Jets and then end up in the Hall of Fame. But I don't think he's Curtis Martin, believe me. I don't see that in him. Okay, Cam Newton, not much of a night passing, but then again, given the weather conditions, why would it be? 13 for 17, good percentage, 118 yards, 1 TD, no interceptions, 114.3 passer rating, and that's a pretty good one for him. But Myers, he continues to be the star of the show going forward. And as I said, for a guy who was on Tom Brady's feces list for a good part of his time spent with the GOAT, Myers has blossomed with a little faith from Mr. Newton. So he caught 5 of the 7 passes thrown his way, 59 yards. He was the Patriots' leading receiver on a night that did not lend itself to passing yardage. And, of course, he did have that amazing touchdown pass, and you can't ask for better than that. Defensively, safety Kyle Duggar. It was his first NFL start. He ended up with 12 tackles, which was a game high. That's pretty impressive. And here's the story. We've been talking about Chase Winovich, the man who looks like who could step into the role of the mighty Thor if he so desired, and if Chris Hemsworth didn't want to do it anymore. He had 7 tackles, 6 solo, and Jeff Howe of The Athletic credited him with 10 pressures during the night. And you can see that whatever the tenure and the reasons for his sort of decreased snap counts over a period of games in the middle of the season, whatever that was, it got to him. So he has played some very good football, increasingly good in the following weeks. So that's a good sign, because their linebacking core continues to be a sore spot for this team, and it just makes you wonder what might have happened if Dante Hightower had not been decided to opt out at the beginning of the season. Cheers. Now, as I said, it's probably fair to get a little bit more excited now, because here you are 10 weeks into the season. The Patriots have 7 more games to go. And, they're back into the hunt a little bit. This was a quality win. This Ravens team is not bad at all. But at 4-5, let's not go crazy, folks. I mean, come on. You look at the schedule that's coming up, and I know it is the God-given right of every football fan in New England to overreact to everything. But the fact of the matter is, they're still 2 games behind every other team in the wild card race. And yes, it is an expanded wild card field this year, but they still have some room to catch up. And also, everybody else in the AFC East won this weekend. And how's that for a shock? Have you seen the Miami Dolphins lately? It's a little scary. They're actually playing well. So here's the deal. You look at the schedule going ahead, and they are playing at Houston this coming Sunday, 1:00 game. They've had good luck there over the years, and as I've said before, I picked the Patriots at 8-8 at the beginning of the year, and I think that they got off track for a while. I had a feeling if they could pick up a game somewhere, and they did already. I didn't expect this to be the one. I had expected in my September picks that they would beat the Texans. So now that they're back on the pace to 8-8, this is a bonus, because I thought that maybe that makeup game for them after losing to the Denver Broncos might be coming later in the season. So, but as you can see from the schedule that's up there and from what my picks were originally, it is not an easy road. I mean, I do think that they will beat the Texans. I still do. Now, I thought they'd beat the Arizona Cardinals the following week, but I don't think Arizona is a pushover. So, the coming out here to play could be a factor. Young quarterback facing a Belichick defense, even a let's just say a 75% of a Belichick defense of past years, that could be a factor. But that game could be a loss. They're going to have to play well to maintain the pace. Now, here we go. Here's the stretch that I think is really dangerous. They go out to Los Angeles for the better part of 2 weeks. They play the Chargers in a Sunday game at SoFi Stadium. I think that's a Sunday game, and maybe it's a Saturday. I'd have to look it up. And then they play the Rams on a Thursday night game. Now, at first I thought they would lose both of those. I think they might be able to steal one of them. It might be the game against the Chargers. Looks like the Rams have gotten their second win. So maybe they can steal that loss against the game against the Chargers and reverse what I thought. But then after that killer trip, they have to go right to Miami. Now, they will have a few extra days to rest up beforehand, of course, because of the Thursday game. But Miami is playing out of its mind right now. I had that down as an L before because I just think the Patriots never play well in Miami. But maybe that was a Tom Brady thing, but no, I still think it's going to be an L the way they're playing. Now, after the Miami game, there's a game against Buffalo coming. All right. I originally picked the Buffalo Bills to lose that game in Foxborough because I just don't trust the Buffalo Bills. I don't know if they will this time around. Now, granted, the Patriots gave them a pretty good run for their money up in Buffalo, but I think that's still a possible L. And if they lose both those games, so they'll still have a losing streak of 3 in a row. It just comes a little bit differently than I thought it would be. And, of course, they finished the season with the Jets, and by that time the Jets may have pulled out of the NFL. And I'm still seeing 7-9 as a possibility if they go 4-5 down the. They're 4-5 now, and I'm a little afraid of what the future may hold. But they're on the pace for 8-8. 7-9 is likely. I don't know if they're going to be able to reverse anything else against some of the better teams they play. And that way I would not get all that excited about the potential of a playoff berth. But at least as long as if they're competitive, if they're playing hard, playing well, I know that's not enough to satisfy a New England audience, but be enough to satisfy me. So, all right. So that should be it for tonight's episode. I want to thank Lisa Downs, my guest. I want to have more of these split screen things, and I will figure out how to do the split screen. I think I actually had it working, but I didn't do something to get it work the way I wanted to. But so, of course, as usual, you can reach me by email at theownersbox2020 at gmail.com, and you can try me at snail mail at the Owner's Box, Post Office Box 272, Mansfield, Massachusetts 02048. And the reason why I put this at the end this week is that I know that many of you have gone to my website, which is also called Blogging Fearlessly, but It is www.theownersbox2020.com, and that's where you can find links to my audio and video podcasts. Now, understand that my interview with Lisa Downs was actually much longer, and that is bonus material on the upcoming episode of The Owner's Box, the original and the best. That will be on my webpage and on all of those podcasting platforms that I told you about earlier. And that should be on there probably within a day or two. But, of course, The Owner's Box After Dark, you can go to YouTube, search for The Owner's Box After Dark. And these are addresses. I don't always have to do the reverb on that. If you go to YouTube and ask and search for that, you will find them all. And then you can subscribe to that page, and it doesn't cost you anything. And then you'll always have notifications as to when a new episode of The Owner's Box After Dark is ready for your viewing. So I hope you will take advantage of that and enjoy it. Other than that, just my usual admonitions, and I've already held it up. Use your hand sanitizer, wear your masks. Come on, folks. We got to get this under control. We really do. I want to see sports. You want to see sports. I want to go to restaurants. You want to go to restaurants. Let's get real. Because if we don't get real, people are going to get real for us, and nobody likes that. Okay? Be safe. Be healthy. Think of your neighbors and your friends and your children and your parents and your grandparents. Think of all of those people. And please, do the best you can to fight this thing. And I'll see you again soon. Good night, everybody.